I'm always writing. It's a hobby. So, and I don't think of what I'm going to write about. To me, it sort of spoils the magic of what I do. Yeah. So I don't often come to writing a song with much of an idea. Maybe a title, or maybe just a phrase, or just a thought I've had. But I hardly ever come to it with much more than that. And I don't really come to it thinking, oh, I'm going to write a bunch of sad songs, or I'm going to write a bunch of happy songs, because that would get a bit boring. You know, I'd like to write a happy one, and then I'm bored with that and sort of sad one. So there's no method, really. And I think if I work at it, it's to work at not having a method.
I mean, do you get snatches of tunes that come to you that you have to hum into a dictaphone so you keep those in store, or do you hold them in your head?
I do a bit of that, but they don't tend to be the good ones.
Right.
You know, so I've got cassettes with millions of snatches of tunes, but that's where they stay.
Right.
On this little cassette. But normally I'll come and I'll sit down and I'll start strumming something I fancy, you know, doing, either a key that I fancy playing around in.
Always on the guitar first, is it?
No, or on piano.
Right, yeah.
No, strum a piano as well. And just see where I go to first. Yeah. Just see where it leads me. It's how we always did it. Yeah. You know, I would sit down with John and we would just sort of follow this road.
Right.
You know, it's like, okay, well, that
So you never write a full formal lyric as a poem on a paper?
No, just write it as I go along. Yeah. First verse, second verse, middle eight, third verse. And just try and get to the end in one go. That's normally then pretty much written.
Right.
So you've got your melody, your words, your middle, and then you may then look at it and just sort of think, oh, that line's a bit ropey, or a bit, you know, I should change that. But if you're lucky, more often than not, you know, you suddenly find you've just sort of done it. And I think because John and I developed this way of doing it, I mean, literally, we used to get rung up. I mean, we're in Abbey Road now doing this. Yeah. And we would get rung up by Brian Epstein. And he'd say, right, chaps, you've got the week off next week because you're in the studio the week after, and I'd like you to write the album.
Right.
And we go, oh, yeah. Hey! You know, like that was like, wow, week off. Yeah. And we never looked at it like, what? Write an album in a week? It was more like, yeah, that's a good idea. So, I mean, every day John and I sat down to write.
What, opposite each other with an acoustic guitar?
Two acoustics, me left-handed, him right-handed, sort of looking at each other as if it was like in a mirror, both playing the same chords. We didn't get too fancy, you know, we just both played the chords. We would start off like I've just sort of described. We'd start off with some sort of idea, roughly, get a first verse, and then bounce off each other. So by the time we'd done 2 or 3 hours, which is normally our attention span, we had a little sheet of with lyrics written down on it, and we just had to remember the tune. There was no such things as cassettes, you know,
right? Yeah,
or you know, anything to put it down on. So you just had to remember it, which we ended up thinking that was actually a good thing.
What were some of the songs you can remember writing very quickly under those sort of circumstances?
She Loves You, in a hotel bedroom, on twin beds with the 2 guitars. And we just had to knock it up it needed a single or something, you know.
Even as young men, did you think you could always pick out your good ones? I mean, or were they all good ones?
Well, I think looking back on the Beatles thing, there was actually quite a few good ones, you know, that we didn't necessarily think were that good at the time. But some of them that we didn't think were good, I now think are quite good.
Like what?
One thing, She Loves You.
Right.
I mean, that's quite good. I don't think that was our favourite at the time, but we were trying to write a hit. You know, and you've got to remember, it was very singles orientated in those days. So you were, even though you're making an album, you were actually making an album of singles, one of which or 2 of which would be pulled off and would be your big singles hit. So you were writing quite sort of concise little pieces. And I say we got into the habit of just doing it in one go, hardly ever revisiting it, hardly ever revising the words. And I think it's interesting, if that's how you have to work, that's how you work.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got 2 weeks to do it, that's how you'll work. Well, we didn't. And we came into this studio, we had 3 hours in which to do 2 songs.
Right.
Finished.
Yeah.
So that would be like Yesterday and Michelle. All finished,
Yesterday's an interesting one because there's always the famous example of that being Scrambled Eggs before it was Yesterday.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting because you'd have thought it was such a poignant song that you wouldn't have thought that would work if you were singing or thinking about eggs. But
I got the melody, I got the tune, and then I think it was a sort of young man's way of pretending I wasn't writing a soppy song.
Right.
With a sort of sad song.
So you're being a bit disingenuous, really. Then.
Yeah, just sort of for the mates, scrambled eggs. Oh my baby, I love your legs.
Right, yeah.
But I obviously knew I had to change that, But that was just a sort of joke on the way. But I was pleased with the melody, and I had just woken up one morning with it in my head. Couldn't believe it was mine. Went round and checked it with everyone, and nobody knew it.
What, you sort of sing it to them and say, is this from, have I nicked this off someone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. First of all, to John. Yeah. Wait a minute. Look at this. What is it? What is it? I can't. It must be something because I dreamed it. Right. So I automatically assumed it was something I'd heard, and it just come back in a dream. Took it to George Martin. He said, "No, I never heard of it." Took it to a few other friends, and everyone agreed they'd never heard of it. So it was like, okay, it's mine. Then, don't quite know how, but it is. And then someone reminded me recently, I was on a holiday in Portugal and was driving from Lisbon to the south coast, where it was actually Bruce Welch of The Shadows' holiday villa that he was lending me. But I had this big drive, and on the 3-hour drive, I started thinking of proper lyrics. So got the Yesterday and the Suddenly, and got the real lyrics for it. And Bruce reminded me, actually, that when I got there, I said, have you got a guitar? Have you got a guitar? I hadn't brought mine. He said, yeah. I said, oh, lends it. And I sat down and sort of put it all together with the lyrics,
Right. Yeah, it must have been terrifying if there's no cassettes, that you'd forget it. You'd never get back to it.
But see, this was the thing. It was a kind of terror, but it was a kind of great thing, really. Because as we said, if we forget it tomorrow, it's no good. How can we expect our public to remember it if we can't and we only wrote it yesterday? And what you would find would be that you would sort of forget it towards the end of the day and get a little bit panicked. But first thing in the morning, you go, what was that? Oh, yeah. And it would come back. So you'd play it a bit more on the guitar. That was like the way of cementing it in your mind.
So it seems like, from what you're saying, that all the songs, come from one little snippet of an idea, which is then kind of embellished upon. I think I was reading with it, Magical Mystery Tour when you started that. I think I read somewhere that you started banging out and you just had the first line, roll up for the Mystery Tour, and you were playing it and shouting out snatches of words that Mal Evans was trying to write down as you were going along. I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we would do all that sort of thing. You try any method, really.
Yeah.
But normally it's fairly straightforward, and it is just following the muse. You get an idea. And I always say to people, why I still do it. Some people say, why do you still do it? You've written so many songs. I said, well, I love it. And, if they sacked me tomorrow, I would wake up and write a song.
Yeah.
Just because they'd sacked me.
It's what you do.
And it's what I do, and it's what I love to do.